You're 4 feet tall, weighing just 70 pounds, and your brain is barely half the size of a modern human's. The sun beats down on the harsh savanna as you crouch at the edge of an ancient lake, desperate for water. Your throat burns. You haven't had a drink since yesterday. But something deep in your primitive brain screams danger. The water ripples, just slightly. You lean forward, stone tool clutched in your tiny hand. Your arms are too long for your body, hanging almost to your knees like a chimpanzee's. Your muscles tense, ready to bolt like the prey animal you essentially are. This is your life as Homo habilis, handyman. One of the earliest members of our genus, struggling to survive in East Africa 1.8 million years ago. And in about 15 seconds, you're going to die. If you're using these to fall asleep, that's literally why I make them. So subscribe maybe and tell me, where are you and what time? I check comments and it's like Berlin at breakfast, Boston at bedtime, all at once. The attack comes without warning. 23 feet of prehistoric crocodile erupts from the water, jaws wide enough to swallow your entire torso. This isn't just any crocodile. This is Crocodilus anthropophagus, literally human-eating crocodile, the monster that hunted our ancestors, leaving tooth marks on their fossilized bones. You have no chance. Zero. In a single explosive lunge, those jaws snap shut around your leg with 3,700 pounds of pressure per square inch. The pain is beyond comprehension as you're dragged beneath the surface, your primitive scream cut short by murky water flooding your lungs. Your stone tools scatter across the shore, soon to become part of the archaeological record at Olduvai Gorge. Evidence of another hominin who didn't make it home. Welcome to your incredibly brief life as Homo habilis, where you're not the hunter. You're not even close to the top of the food chain. You're just meat. And the crocodiles? They weren't hunting fish. They were hunting you. The year is 1.8 million BCE. The location is Olduvai Gorge, Tanzania, though it's not a gorge yet. Right now, it's a lake basin surrounded by grasslands and patches of woodland. The climate is getting drier, the trees sparser. It's a world in transition, and you're the wrong species at the wrong time. If a modern human were suddenly transported back to this time and place, their survival odds would be measured in hours, not days, not because of the lack of technology or modern comforts, but because every evolutionary advantage we've developed over the past 2 million years would be stripped away. Homo habilis was laughably small by modern standards. Males stood around 4'3" tall, females even smaller at 3'7". For comparison, that's roughly the size of an 8-year-old child today. Your weight would plummet to between 70 and 85 pounds. But size isn't the only problem. Your proportions would be all wrong. Your arms would suddenly elongate, hanging down to your knees. Your legs would shorten. Your jaw would jut forward. Your brow ridge would become prominent, and your skull would shrink to accommodate a brain of just 600 cubic centimeters, barely 40% the size of your modern brain. This physical downgrade makes you vulnerable in ways you can't comprehend. Your smaller legs mean you can't run as fast or as far. Your smaller brain means your problem-solving abilities and future planning are severely limited, and your tiny body means virtually every predator in this ecosystem views you as a potential meal. The predators here aren't just deadly, they're specially adapted to hunt things exactly your size. Take the leopards. In 2008, researchers found Homo habilis fossils with distinct leopard tooth marks. These big cats didn't just occasionally prey on early humans, they actively targeted them. The evidence is written in tooth marks on a Homo habilis jawbone found at Olduvai. but as terrifying as leopards were, they weren't the apex predator in this ecosystem. That title belongs to Crocodiles anthropophagus. Paleontologists discovered this species in 2010 after examining fossil remains from Olduvai Gorge. The name wasn't chosen arbitrarily. It comes from clear evidence that these monsters specifically preyed on hominins. The fossil record doesn't lie. At least 2 Homo habilis specimens from Olduvai show unmistakable crocodile tooth marks. One specimen, labeled OH8, is a left foot that appears to have been bitten clean off. Another, OH35, is a left leg bone, showing damage from both crocodile and leopard teeth. This poor individual was apparently attacked by a crocodile, then scavenged by a leopard, or vice versa. These weren't just any crocodiles. Crocodiles anthropophagus grew up to 23 feet long and weighed over a ton. Their bite force exceeded that of any land predator alive today. And unlike modern crocodiles, which rarely target humans specifically, these prehistoric monsters appear to have actively hunted our ancestors. Why? Simple opportunity. Early hominins like Homo habilis needed water, just like we do. But in the increasingly arid environment of East Africa 1.8 million years ago, water sources were limited. Predators simply needed to wait at these water sources, knowing that, sooner or later, thirst would drive their prey right to them. The sun rises higher in the sky as your small band of Homo habilis moves across the savanna. There are 12 of you, a typical group size, offering some protection in numbers, but not enough to deter a determined predator. Your larger males are at the front and back, scanning constantly for danger. You're all covered in a light coat of body hair, not full fur like a chimpanzee, but definitely hairier than modern humans. Your skin is dark, adapted to the equatorial sun. Sweat beads on your forehead as the temperature climbs toward 100 degrees. The ground beneath your bare feet is a mix of baked earth and scattered grasses. Occasionally, you pass stands of acacia trees, their umbrella-shaped canopies offering brief respite from the sun. In the distance, you can see herds of antelope and prehistoric horses grazing nervously, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. Your group moves with purpose, but caution. Everyone is hungry. It's been 2 days since anyone found anything substantial to eat. Yesterday, you scavenged the remains of a gazelle killed by a leopard, but there wasn't much left. The bone marrow you extracted using stone hammers provided some nutrition, but not enough. In your hand, you clutch a simple stone tool, an Olduvai chopper made by striking one rock against another to create a sharp edge. It's revolutionary technology for your time, but laughably primitive by modern standards. This tool would be useful for cutting plants or scraping meat from a carcass, but nearly useless against the predators that stalk these plains. The smell of water reaches you before you see it. The entire group quickens their pace unconsciously, driven by thirst. As you crest a small rise, you spot the lake in the distance, its surface glimmering in the harsh sunlight. This is Paleo Lake Olduvai, a shallow, alkaline lake that will eventually dry up and become the famous gorge where your fossilized remains will be discovered 1.8 million years later. But right now, it's life-giving water, and your group desperately needs it. The approach to the water is the most dangerous part of your day. Every predator in the ecosystem knows that prey must come to drink. Your group spreads out, moving in short bursts, stopping frequently to scan for danger. The males make brief, harsh vocalizations, not quite language but communication nonetheless. At the water's edge, tension peaks. Only a few members of the group drink at once, while the others stand guard. You take your turn, crouching low, scooping water quickly to your mouth. That's when you notice the logs. Except they're not logs. No log has that distinctive ridged pattern. No log has those cold, unblinking eyes just breaking the surface. Fear floods your system with adrenaline, but it's too late. The water explodes as Crocodilis anthropophagus launches its attack. 700 pounds of prehistoric predator collides with the smallest female in your group. Her scream is cut short as massive jaws clamp around her torso with bone-crushing force. The water turns red as the crocodile performs the death roll, an attack method unchanged for millions of years. The rotation tears chunks from the victim, making escape impossible. In seconds, she disappears beneath the surface. Your group scatters in panic, primitive screams echoing across the savannah. But the horror isn't over. Where there's one crocodile, there are usually more. A second massive form cuts through the water toward another member of your band. This is not an unusual day for Homo habilis. This is just life, brief, brutal, and usually ending in violent death. The fossil record tells this story clearly. A significant percentage of Homo habilis remains show evidence of predation. You weren't the hunter, you were the hunted. For modern humans, it's nearly impossible to comprehend this reality. We've spent 99.9% of human history as the apex predator. Our big brains, complex social structures, and advanced technology have insulated us from the brutal calculus of nature. But strip all that away, shrink you down to Homo habilis size, and you'd find yourself right back at the bottom of the food chain. And the predators were getting smarter. Crocodilis anthropophagus wasn't just big, it was adaptable. Evidence suggests these predators learned the patterns and behaviors of early hominins, staking out locations where they were likely to find their prey. The relationship wasn't just predator-prey, it was an evolutionary arms race. Every adaptation that helped Homo habilis survive, from stone tools to larger social groups, was met with counter-adaptations by their predators. Those crocodiles that became better at hunting hominins passed those traits to their offspring, creating increasingly specialized hominin hunters. Back at Olduvai, your depleted group huddles under an acacia tree a safe distance from the water. The loss of 2 members is devastating, both emotionally and practically. With fewer individuals to stand guard, to help find food, to protect the young, the group's survival becomes even more precarious. But you'll have to return to the water eventually. Thirst is an unforgiving master. Perhaps tomorrow you'll try a different approach, a different location. Perhaps you'll survive another day. For Homo habilis, every sunrise was a victory against overwhelming odds. Predator attacks weren't rare tragedies. They were a constant, looming threat that shaped every behavior, every decision, every evolutionary adaptation. When paleontologists excavate Olduvai Gorge, they don't just find Homo habilis remains. They find evidence of an entire ecosystem that treated our ancestors as just another food source. The tooth marks on fossil OH8 tell a story more visceral than any written history. Sturzel cow. Clamping down on hominin flesh. The discovery of Crocodilus anthropophagus in 2010 added a crucial piece to the puzzle of human evolution. These weren't just any crocodiles, they were specialist hominin hunters. The name itself, human-eating crocodile, acknowledges this grim relationship. We named the new species Crocodilus anthropophagus in recognition of its apparent preference for consuming hominins, explained Christopher Brochu, the paleontologist who first described the species. The evidence is written in teeth marks on hominin bones, particularly specimens OH8 and OH35 from Olduvai Gorge. These specimens tell a terrifying story. O8, a left foot, shows damage consistent with having been bitten off by a crocodile. O35, a left leg bone from the same site, bears tooth marks from both a crocodile and a leopard-sized carnivore. This wasn't just occasional predation, it's decordasal de ingdor. And it wasn't just crocodiles. The early hominin world was a gauntlet of specialized predators. Dinofelis, a saber-toothed cat the size of a jaguar, is sometimes called the hominin hunter due to the frequency with which its fossils are found alongside those of our ancestors. Hasmoporthetes, the hunting hyena, was faster and more agile than modern hyenas, perfectly adapted for running down small prey like Homo habilis. Even the skies weren't safe. Crowned eagles, which still exist today in Africa, have been documented killing primates larger than themselves. Fossil evidence suggests they occasionally targeted young or small hominins as well. For Homo habilis, danger lurked in every habitat. The open savanna offered nowhere to hide from fast-running predators. The dwindling forests might provide some safety in the trees, but Homo habilis was already losing its climbing adaptations, and the water sources they desperately needed were the most dangerous places of all, dominated by Crocodilus anthropophagus. The most haunting aspect of this ancient reality is how it shaped our evolution. Every adaptive trait modern humans possess, our intelligence, our social structures, our technology, emerged under the selective pressure of avoiding predation. We became what we are today, partly because our ancestors were prey. Dawn breaks over Olduvai. Your small band of Homo habilis stirs beneath the meager shelter of a thorn tree. The night was tense. You heard leopards calling in the darkness, too close for comfort. No one slept deeply. Today, you must find water again. Yesterday's losses are still fresh, the group's vocalizations subdued and anxious, but thirst drives you forward toward a different part of the lake, hoping to avoid the crocodiles that claimed your companions. As your band moves cautiously through the grassland, you spot another group in the distance, but they're not Homo habilis. They're larger, more robust hominins with massive jaws and sagittal crests running along their skulls. Paranthropus boisei, another hominin species sharing this unforgiving landscape. You give them wide berth. Resources are too scarce for friendly interactions between different species. Besides, they're heading toward the water too, and perhaps they'll draw the attention of predators away from your group. The water's edge looks clear as your group approaches. No obvious crocodile logs breaking the surface. The males make soft vocalizations, organizing the group's approach. Some will drink while others stand guard. It's a system developed through harsh experience. You're in the second drinking group. The first approaches the water cautiously, crouching low, scooping handful after handful to their mouths. Nothing happens. The tension eases slightly. Your turn comes. You move forward with three others, eyes scanning the water, the shore, the surrounding grass. You crouch, reach your hand toward the surface. The water explodes upward. This time, it's not from the lake, but from a narrow channel feeding into it, a perfect ambush point. The crocodile's lunge falls just short of your hand, massive jaws snapping shut on empty air as you scramble backward in terror. But your group mate isn't so lucky. The crocodile's second lunge catches him by the leg. His scream is primal, cutting through the African air as he's dragged into deeper water. The last you see is his outstretched hand, still clutching the stone tool he never got to use. This is the reality you've been born into. This is what it means to be Homo habilis in a world of specialized predators. Your stone tools, your slightly larger brain, your social grouping, these give you a slim chance at survival, nothing more. And tomorrow, you'll have to return to the water again. The fossil record preserves these moments in disturbing clarity. The tooth marks on hominin bones, the distinctive patterns of damage from crocodile death rolls, the evidence of scavenging after predator kills. This wasn't rare. This wasn't occasional. This was everyday life for our ancestors. For modern humans to truly comprehend what life was like for Homo habilis, we would need to radically shift our perspective. Imagine living in a world where you are constantly hunted, where every trip to obtain water might be your last, where your only defenses are a small stone tool and the vigilance of your equally vulnerable group mates. This is why you wouldn't survive a day as Homo habilis, not because you couldn't find food or make tools or find shelter, but because the predators, especially Crocodilus anthropophagus, were too perfectly adapted to hunting you. And they weren't hunting fish, they were hunting you. The crocodile's tail disappears beneath the blood-clouded water, dragging what's left of your groupmate into the depths. Screams echo across the savanna, then silence. The remaining Homo habilis scatter into the grass, hearts pounding in tiny chests. You survived, for now. Your mouth is still bone dry. The irony crushes you, surrounded by water that will kill you if you try to drink it. This is the brutal reality of being Homo habilis. Water, the thing you need most, is also your greatest danger zone. But here's the kicker. You still need to drink. Today. There's no option to DoorDash some bottled water to your primitive camp. And every water source within walking distance is patrolled by the same prehistoric crocodiles that just turned your friend into lunch. Welcome to your everyday nightmare as one of humanity's earliest ancestors, where the simple act of getting a drink might be your last. But crocodiles are just one of your problems. Your tiny, primitive body is woefully unprepared for, well, basically everything in this environment. The African sun bears down mercilessly as your depleted band regroups a safe distance from the water. Sweat drips from your prominent brow ridge, your dark skin offering some protection from the UV rays that would fry a modern human in hours. Your body hair, thicker than ours but thinner than a chimp's, provides minimal shelter from the elements. You're hungry, always hungry, and the hunger is about to drive you into the next deadly challenge of your day. 2 miles east, a plume of vultures circles above the savanna. Your group spots them, and without a word, everyone knows what it means. Carrion, a potential meal, the scavenging opportunity that keeps your species alive but might get you killed. To understand the precarious food situation of Homo habilis, forget everything you know about hunting. You're not the hunter, not even close. You're barely even a competent scavenger. Those Olduvai stone tools you've made, the ones paleontologists will later celebrate as humanity's first technology, are pitifully inadequate for taking down prey. The sharp flakes can cut flesh and the heavier cores can smash bones for marrow, but you have nothing remotely resembling a projectile weapon. Hunting requires getting dangerously close to animals that can easily outrun, outfight, and outkill you, so instead you scavenge. You take what's left after the real predators have had their fill. Your group moves cautiously toward the vulture swarm. The tall grass makes visibility difficult. You can only see a few feet ahead. Any predator could be lurking, waiting. The males at the front clutch their stone choppers, not as weapons but as tools to quickly butcher whatever remains they find before bigger scavengers arrive. The smell hits you first, the putrid stench of rotting flesh baking in the African heat. It's revolting, but also mouth-watering to your constantly hungry body. As you get closer, you see them, hyenas already at work on what's left of a wildebeest. 4 adults tearing at the carcass, their bone-crushing jaws making short work of parts even lions can't process. Your group freezes. Hyenas aren't just scavengers, they're apex predators in their own right, and a small group of Homo habilis would be easy pickings, but the hunger drives you forward. The older male at the front of your band makes a decision, grabbing a handful of rocks from the ground. What happens next is a survival technique that helped keep our species alive: confrontational scavenging. With primitive screams and thrown rocks, your group rushes the hyenas, creating a chaotic display that momentarily confuses them. It's a massive gamble. If the hyenas stand their ground, you're all dead. But the sudden noise and movement sometimes, just sometimes, startles predators enough to make them retreat temporarily. Today, it works. The hyenas back off, just far enough, just long enough for your group to rush in and hack away at the carcass with stone tools. You're not fighting for the choicest cuts, those are long gone. You're fighting for scraps, for tendons, for bits of meat stuck between ribs, and most importantly, for bones with marrow still inside. This is your fine dining experience as Homo habilis, frantically cutting away pieces of a rotting carcass while keeping one eye on the hyenas circling just 30 feet away, waiting for their chance to counterattack. A modern human, with their larger size and brain, might fashion a spear or organize a more effective group defense. You have none of these advantages. Your tools are basic. Your communication is rudimentary. No complex language, just alarm calls and simple vocalizations. Your planning ability is limited by a brain half the size of your modern descendants. The smell of blood has carried downwind. In the distance, you spot something that makes your primitive heart race. Lions, a pair of males, moving toward the commotion. Unlike modern African lions, these are Panthera leofossilis, larger and more aggressive than their contemporary cousins. Your group has maybe 2 minutes before they arrive. Frantic cutting and scraping intensifies. A female from your group smashes a leg bone between 2 rocks, cracking it open to reveal the fatty marrow inside, a calorie-rich prize that might make this deadly gamble worthwhile. Others grab what they can: strips of meat, smaller bones, anything edible. Then, as quickly as you arrived, your group retreats, clutching your meager prizes. The hyenas immediately reclaim the carcass, only to find themselves facing the approaching lions. Predator confronts predator while you escape with barely enough food to justify the risk. This is how you eat. This is how you survive. This is why Homo habilis was constantly on the brink of starvation. Teeth tell the tale of your diet. Isotope analysis of Homo habilis teeth shows you ate some meat, more than earlier hominins, but were still largely plant-dependent. The meat you did get came mostly from scavenging, not hunting. You were essentially a vulture with stone tools. Back at your temporary camp, little more than a cluster of rocks offering minimal protection, your group divides the spoils. There's not enough to go around. There never is. The strongest get first pick, with juveniles and weaker adults getting whatever remains. Social hierarchy isn't just cultural, it's survival. You've made it through another meal without becoming a meal yourself. But the day isn't over, and neither are the dangers. As afternoon fades toward evening, your group faces another critical decision: where to sleep. Modern humans take shelter for granted. Homo habilis had no permanent shelter, no caves in this environment, no structures beyond the simplest arrangements of stones that might have supported crude brush windbreaks. Sleeping on the ground meant being vulnerable to every nocturnal predator. Sleeping in trees was safer from some threats, but required finding suitable trees, increasingly rare in the savanna environment, and still left you exposed to leopards, which hunt in trees with ease. Your group chooses a cluster of acacia trees. Their thorny branches offer some protection, and a few members climb into the lower limbs. Others remain on the ground, huddled together, taking turns staying awake to watch for danger. The night brings new predators. Hyenas whoop in the darkness. The roar of lions carries across the savanna. But most terrifying are the sounds you don't hear. The silent stalk of leopards. The stealthy approach of saber-toothed cats like Dinophilis, a predator particularly adept at hunting primates. Sleep comes in short, fitful bursts, your primitive brain never fully relaxing, always alert to the sounds of potential death approaching. This chronic stress, this constant vigilance would burn out a modern human in days. For Homo habilis, it was just life. Dawn breaks. You've survived the night, but several in your group are showing signs of illness. Their skin is hot to the touch, their breathing labored. Without modern medicine, without even the most basic understanding of disease, there's nothing to be done except hope they recover on their own. Disease was another constant companion of early hominins. Parasites from contaminated water and meat, infections from even minor wounds, malaria, dysentery, tuberculosis. The list of potential killers is endless, and your immune system, while robust against familiar threats, had no defense against new pathogens. One of your sick groupmates won't last the day. You can see it in their glazed eyes, their shallow breathing. In the brutal arithmetic of survival, they've become a liability, consuming resources, slowing movement, potentially attracting predators. Some early hominin groups might have abandoned their sick. Others, displaying the beginnings of the social bonds that would later define humanity, stayed with them until the end. Your group chooses to stay, at least for now. It's a decision that reflects something uniquely human emerging in these primitive ancestors: compassion, even when it comes at a survival cost. By midday, the sick member has died. There's no ceremony, no burial, no ritual to mark their passing. Their body will be left behind when the group moves on, soon to become part of the food chain they once participated in. The constant presence of death was a fundamental reality for Homo habilis. The fossil record suggests few lived beyond 30-35 years, with many dying much younger. Child mortality was staggeringly high. Disease, predation, accidents, starvation, dehydration, hypothermia. The ways to die were innumerable, the ways to prevent death few. As your group prepares to move on in search of water, that eternal, deadly necessity, you face the same gauntlet of dangers that killed your companions. There's no respite, no safe zone, no moment when vigilance can lapse. This is why you wouldn't survive a day as Homo habilis, not just because of the predators, though they're reason enough, not just because of disease or the elements, but because the entire existence of this early hominin was a constant, unrelenting struggle against forces overwhelmingly stacked against them. Modern humans, with our technology, our medicine, our abundant food, and clean water, have forgotten what it means to be prey. We've forgotten the bone-deep terror of knowing something bigger and stronger is hunting us. We've forgotten what it's like to be halfway down the food chain, not at the top. Homo habilis remembered. They lived it every day. The great irony is that this very pressure, this constant threat of violent death, was one of the driving forces of human evolution. The hominins who survived were those with slightly bigger brains, slightly better tools, slightly more effective social structures. Each tiny advantage increased survival odds just enough to pass those genes to the next generation. Your group begins the trek to another water source, hoping this one might be marginally safer than the last. The journey will take you across open savanna, through patches of woodland, and into the territory of competing hominin species like Paranthropus boisei. These weren't the only hominins sharing your world. Depending on exactly when you lived, you might have encountered Homo rudolfensis with their larger brains, or even early Homo erectus, who would eventually replace your species entirely. Competition wasn't just from predators. Your evolutionary cousins, too. The relationship between these different hominin species wasn't always hostile, but resources were scarce enough that conflict was inevitable. Archaeological evidence suggests violent confrontations between different early human species, adding warfare to the list of survival challenges. As you walk, one of your group spots something in the distance, another band of hominins, but these aren't Homo habilis. They're taller, their legs longer, their movements more efficient. Early Homo erectus, the species that would inherit the world after Homo habilis disappeared. You give them wide berth. They have better tools, better weapons, better brains. In the brutal calculus of evolution, they're the future. You're the past. But you don't know that yet. All you know is the constant struggle to survive another day, to find water without being eaten by crocodiles, to find food without being killed by lions or hyenas, to sleep without falling prey to leopards, to avoid disease, injury, exposure, and starvation. This was life for Homo habilis. This is why you wouldn't survive a day in their world. Not because you're weaker than them. You're not. You're larger, stronger, smarter. But because you've lost the instincts, the constant vigilance, the acceptance of perpetual danger that defined their existence. The fossil record tells this story in silent eloquence. The tooth marks on bones, the predator damage, the signs of nutritional stress, the evidence of injuries, disease, and early death. This wasn't the exception, it was the rule. For every Homo habilis fossil discovered by paleoanthropologists, thousands more never fossilized at all. They were consumed completely by the predators that ruled their world. They became part of the metabolism of ancient crocodiles, big cats, and hyenas, leaving no trace for us to find. So, the next time you sip clean water without fear, remember your ancestor, OH8, the Homo habilis, whose foot was severed by a crocodile 1.8 million years ago, whose fossilized remains bear mute testimony to a world where humans weren't the hunter but the hunted. And the crocodiles? They weren't hunting fish. They were hunting you. The sun hangs low on the horizon as your band of Homo habilis approaches another water source. Not the main lake this time, but a narrow river feeding into it. After yesterday's crocodile attack, no one wants to return to the lake itself. Maybe here, where the water is shallower and flowing, you'll find safety. You're wrong. What you don't understand, what you can't understand with your primitive brain, is that Crocodilus anthropophagus isn't just another predator. It's a living fossil, the product of 85 million years of evolutionary refinement. While your species has existed for barely 700,000 years, crocodiles have been perfecting their predatory skills since the time of dinosaurs, and they've been hunting primates for millions of years. The riverbank appears empty as your group approaches cautiously. No visible threats, no obvious crocodile logs breaking the surface. The water flows clear over a rocky bottom, offering better visibility than the murky lake. It seems safer. It isn't. What you can't see is the crocodile completely submerged near the opposite bank, only its nostrils and eyes breaking the surface, and those so perfectly camouflaged they're nearly invisible. It's watching, assessing, calculating. Its primitive brain is surprisingly adept at one thing: predation. Crocodilus anthropophagus wasn't just big, though at up to 23 feet long and over 2,000 pounds, it dwarfed modern Nile crocodiles. What made it truly terrifying was its specialization. This wasn't a generalist predator that occasionally ate hominins. This was a species that specifically targeted them. How do we know? The fossil record tells the tale. When paleontologists Christopher Brochu and his team discovered and named this species in 2010, they chose the name Anthropophagus, literally human eater, because of clear evidence that these creatures regularly preyed on hominins. The smoking gun came from Olduvai Gorge specimens, OH8 and OH35, Homo habilis fossils bearing unmistakable crocodile tooth marks. These weren't random attacks. They were part of a predatory pattern that lasted hundreds of thousands of years. Your group spreads out along the riverbank. Like before, you take turns drinking, keeping watch in all directions, but your eyes are fixed on the water and the surrounding savanna. No one is looking up. The attack comes from above. A massive crocodile launches itself from the top of the riverbank, where it had been lying in wait, hidden in the tall grass. It's using gravity and surprise rather than an aquatic ambush, an advanced hunting technique that paleontologists have documented in modern crocodilians but never imagined in their ancient counterparts. 700 pounds of prehistoric predator slams into two members of your group simultaneously, massive jaws closing on one's arm and shoulder. The force is catastrophic. 3,700 pounds per square inch, easily enough to crush bone. The victim's scream is inhuman, primal, the sound of prey that knows it's about to die. But the second targeted hominin, you, manages to scramble away, losing only a patch of skin to the crocodile's armored hide. In your primitive brain, this registers as miraculous luck. It isn't luck. The crocodile was targeting the smaller individual. The water churns red as your groupmate is dragged under, his struggles already weakening as shock sets in. The rest of your band scatters in panic, primitive calls echoing across the savanna. No one attempts a rescue. Against Crocodiles anthropophagus, there is no rescue. What makes these prehistoric crocodiles so perfectly adapted to hunting hominins? The answer lies in co-evolution, the way predator and prey shape each other over evolutionary time. As early hominins became more terrestrial, spending more time near water sources rather than in them, crocodiles adapted their hunting strategies. They developed behaviors specifically targeting these new bipedal primates that had to come to the water's edge to drink. The most obvious adaptation was size. Crocodiles anthropophagus grew significantly larger than earlier crocodilian species, easily capable of overpowering even adult male hominins. Their bite force increased proportionally, able to crush the denser bones of terrestrial mammals. But size wasn't their only advantage. These predators also developed more sophisticated hunting behaviors. Modern crocodiles typically ambush from the water, lunging at prey at the water's edge. Fossil evidence suggests Crocodiles anthropophagus employed a wider range of tactics, including 1. Stealth stalking through shallow water toward drinking hominins. 2. Lying in wait in tall grass near water sources. 3. Using riverbanks as elevation for lunging attacks. 4. Cooperative hunting in groups to drive prey into ambush points. Most terrifying was their apparent ability to learn and remember. Modern crocodilians can recognize patterns in prey behavior, remembering successful hunting locations and returning to them. Crocodiles anthropophagus likely had similar cognitive abilities, learning the habits of hominin groups and anticipating their movements. They weren't just hunting individuals, they were hunting patterns. For Homo habilis, this created an almost impossible survival challenge. You needed water daily, but water sources were where these specialized predators concentrated their hunting efforts. Unlike modern humans, you couldn't dig wells, build water collection systems, or transport water over long distances. You had to go to the water, knowing each approach might be your last. Your depleted band has fled a half-mile from the river, gathering in the relative safety of a rocky outcrop. The emotional impact of losing another member is visible in hunched postures and subdued vocalizations, but there's no time for grief. The water problem remains unsolved and night is approaching. One of the older females in your group makes a series of gestures and soft calls. She's indicating another direction, away from both the lake and the river. Something in her memory, some knowledge gained through years of survival, suggests another option. The group follows her lead, moving cautiously through the gathering dusk. After a mile of walking, you discover what she remembered. A small spring seeping from between rocks, creating a shallow pool barely 3 feet across. It's not much, but it's enough for now. And most importantly, it's too small for a full-grown Crocodiles anthropophagus to hide in. This knowledge, the location of safe water sources, would have been critical survival information passed between Homo habilis groups. Those who knew where to find crocodile-free water lived longer, reproduced more successfully, and passed both their genes and their knowledge to the next generation. But even these smaller water sources weren't completely safe. Juvenile crocodiles, more agile and able to hide in smaller spaces, posed their own threat, and other predators, leopards, lions, hyenas, knew that these alternative water sources attracted vulnerable prey. There was no true safety in the world of Homo habilis, only degrees of danger. As your group drinks from the spring, taking turns as always, the female who led you here keeps watch from a higher rock. Her vigilance has kept her alive this long, an impressive feat in a species with a life expectancy of barely 30 years. But that vigilance has come at a cost. Her body bears the scars of previous encounters with predators, a mangled hand from a leopard attack, deep scars across her back from hyena teeth. These weren't unusual injuries. The fossil record of early hominins shows frequent evidence of predator attacks, many of which were survived. One Homo habilis specimen shows crocodile tooth marks on the femur, marks that show signs of healing, indicating the individual survived the initial attack, at least for a while. Such survivors would have carried critical first-hand knowledge of predator behavior. They would have known the warning signs of a hidden crocodile, the best techniques for approaching water, the safest times of day to drink. This knowledge passed through the group by observation and basic communication, provided a slim edge against the perfectly adapted predators waiting at every water source. But Crocodilus anthropophagus was adapting too. As hominins became more cautious around main water bodies, these crocodiles expanded their hunting territory, moving up smaller streams and even onto land for short distances, increasing their encounter range. The fossil record shows this evolutionary arms race in stark detail. Specimens of Crocodilus anthropophagus show increasing robustness over time, with later examples having stronger limbs for terrestrial movement and even more powerful bite force. They were evolving specifically to counter hominin adaptations. For paleontologists, this co-evolutionary relationship provides crucial insights into human evolution. Many of our species' defining characteristics, our intelligence, our social cooperation, our tool use, were shaped by predation pressure. We became what we are, partly because of what was trying to eat us. Night has fallen. Your group huddles in the meager shelter of the rocks surrounding the spring. No one sleeps deeply. The darkness around you is alive with sounds, the whooping of distant hyenas, the roar of lions, the constant buzz and chirp of insects. Any of these sounds could be the prelude to an attack. But it's the sounds you don't hear that truly terrify your primitive brain. Crocodiles are silent hunters. They don't roar to announce their presence. They don't make warning sounds. They appear without warning, erupting from water or lunging from concealed positions with explosive force. This silence created a unique kind of psychological terror for early hominins. Other predators announced themselves, defined territories through vocalizations, gave some warning of their presence. Crocodilus anthropophagus offered no such courtesy. Their attacks came without preamble, without warning, from directions no one was watching. Modern humans, with our larger brains, might eventually recognize patterns in crocodile behavior, preferred hunting times, subtle signs of their presence, seasonal variations in aggression. Homo habilis, with a brain half our size, lacked this capacity for complex pattern recognition. Each encounter was like the first, the learning curve reset by cognitive limitations. Dawn breaks over the savannah. Your group has survived another night, but the ongoing challenge remains, finding enough water to survive without becoming prey in the process. Today, you'll try another approach. Instead of going directly to water sources, your group will scavenge for water-rich plant foods, tubers, fruits, anything that might reduce the need for direct water consumption. It's a strategy born of desperate necessity, an adaptation to the ever-present threat of Crocodilis anthropophagus. As you dig for tubers in the hard-packed earth, using a sharpened stone to break the soil, something catches your eye in the distance. A massive form moving through the tall grass, too low to be a large mammal, too large to be a small one. It's not possible, not here, so far from the water, not in the open savanna where no crocodile should be, but your eyes aren't deceiving you. Crocodilis anthropophagus, driven by hunger and adaptation, has ventured far from its aquatic habitat in search of prey. What you're witnessing is one of the most alarming behaviors of this prehistoric predator, extended terrestrial hunting. Modern crocodiles can move on land, but they're awkward, slow, and quickly tire. Crocodilis anthropophagus, with its more developed limbs and greater stamina, could pursue prey across surprising distances. The fossil record confirms this behavior. The leg bones of Crocodilis anthropophagus show attachment points for stronger muscles, adaptations for more efficient terrestrial locomotion. They weren't just waiting at water sources, they were actively hunting across a range of habitats. For Homo habilis, this meant nowhere was truly safe. The one predator you could previously avoid by staying away from water was now capable of finding you even in the open savanna. The psychological impact must have been devastating, a constant, unrelenting vigilance with no respite. The crocodile hasn't spotted your group yet. Its primitive brain is focused on something else. Another band of primates moving across the grassland. Not Homo habilis this time, but Paranthropus boisei, the robust Australopithecine with massive jaws adapted for processing tough plant foods. From your hidden position, you witness what happens next. The crocodile accelerates suddenly, covering ground with surprising speed. The Paranthropus group scatters, high-pitched alarm calls cutting through the morning air. But one isn't fast enough, a juvenile, separated from the adults. The attack is brutal, efficient, primeval. Massive jaws close around the small hominin's torso, the sound of cracking ribs audible even at this distance. There's no prolonged struggle, no dramatic battle, just the sudden, violent transition from life to death that characterized this ancient ecosystem. Your group uses the distraction to move quickly in the opposite direction, putting distance between yourselves and the terrestrial crocodile. Today, another hominin species paid the predator tax. Tomorrow, it might be you. This wasn't just Homo habilis's reality. It was the reality for all hominin species in East Africa during this period. Paranthropus, early Homo, all faced the same gauntlet of predators, with Crocodilis anthropophagus at the apex. The irony is that this predation pressure likely accelerated human evolution. Those hominins with slightly larger brains, slightly better problem-solving abilities, slightly more effective communication and cooperation had marginally better survival odds. Over generations, these small advantages accumulated, driving the cognitive and social evolution that would eventually lead to Homo sapiens. In a very real sense, we owe our existence to the predators that hunted our ancestors. Without that selective pressure, we might still be small-brained primates with limited technology and social structures. Crocodilis anthropophagus, by hunting Homo habilis so effectively, helped create the conditions that would eventually lead to its own extinction. But that's cold comfort to you, a small, vulnerable Homo habilis trying to survive in a world where one of the most perfectly adapted predators in evolutionary history has specifically evolved to hunt you. And they weren't hunting fish, they were hunting you. Your group huddles in the shadow of an acacia tree, hearts still racing from the crocodile encounter. That paranthropus child died instead of you was pure chance, not skill. The oldest female makes a series of soft grunts, motioning toward a rocky outcrop in the distance. The message is clear without words. Move to higher ground. In the brutal arithmetic of survival, every adaptation matters. Every tiny advantage might be the difference between life and death, and Homo habilis was desperately trying to adapt. What does a species do when it's being hunted by the perfect predator? When it's trapped between the need for water and the certainty that water means death? When its body, brain, and tools are woefully inadequate against the threats it faces daily, it changes or it dies. The adaptations of Homo habilis weren't dramatic, visible shifts like growing wings or developing armor. They were subtle, incremental changes in behavior, social structure, and cognitive capacity, each tiny improvement offering a slightly better chance of seeing tomorrow. Let's start with the most obvious adaptation: tools. The Olduvai stone tools that define Homo habilis weren't originally weapons. They were food processing tools, sharp flakes for cutting meat from scavenged carcasses, heavy cores for breaking bones to extract marrow. But necessity is the mother of invention, even for a brain barely half the size of yours. As your group moves toward the rocky outcrop, each member clutches their stone tools differently now, not just as implements for processing food, but as potential weapons. The oldest male has modified his, using another stone to create a sharper, more pointed edge. It's primitive, barely recognizable as deliberate design, but it's the first glimmer of weapon creation. Would it stop a charging Crocodilus anthropophagus? Not a chance, but against smaller threats, or as a last-ditch defense, it offered something previous hominins lacked: a fighting chance. Archaeological evidence confirms this adaptation. Later, Olduvai tools show signs of modification beyond what was needed for food processing. The cognitive leap from stone for cutting meat to stone for protection may seem obvious to your modern brain, but for Homo habilis, it represented a significant evolutionary advancement. The rocky outcrop offers another adaptation: high ground. As your group climbs the gentle slope, you gain a critical advantage: visibility. From this elevated position, you can see potential threats approaching, especially the low, sinuous movement of crocodiles far from water. This preference for elevated rest positions isn't unique to hominins. Many prey species seek high ground for safety, but for Homo habilis, it represented a conscious choice, a deliberate selection of environments that offered better survival odds. Those groups that regularly chose safer rest positions survived longer, reproduced more successfully, and passed their cautious behavior to subsequent generations. Night approaches, and your group faces the eternal dilemma: how to sleep safely in a world full of predators. Here, another adaptation becomes apparent: social sleeping arrangements. The group doesn't scatter randomly across the outcrop. They arrange themselves deliberately, with the most vulnerable, juveniles, and the elderly in the center, surrounded by adults of prime reproductive age. The males take positions on the perimeter, unconsciously creating a defensive formation. This wasn't conscious military strategy. It was instinctive behavior shaped by predation pressure. Groups that arranged themselves in ways that minimized predation survived to reproduce. Those that didn't became a midnight meal for leopards and hyenas. The fossil record supports this adaptation. Sites where multiple Homo habilis remains have been found often show positioning consistent with social sleeping arrangements. The predator marks on those remains are predominantly on individuals that would have been positioned at the perimeter. Exactly what we'd expect if this defensive sleeping formation was common. But physical positioning was just one aspect of social adaptation. More important was the development of cooperative vigilance, taking turns watching for danger while others sleep. As your group settles for the night, the oldest male remains sitting upright, eyes scanning the darkening savanna below. In 2 hours, he'll wake another adult to take his place. This rotation of sentry duty allowed something precious in a predator-rich environment: sleep. Without it, exhaustion would quickly lead to fatal mistakes. With it, at least some members of the group could rest deeply enough to function effectively the next day. Modern hunter-gatherer groups still practice forms of this vigilance rotation, a behavior so deeply embedded in our evolutionary history that it persists even when the original predator threat has disappeared. It's in your DNA, a legacy of ancestors who survived because they never all slept at the same time. Dawn breaks over the savanna. Your group has survived another night, but the ever-present challenges remain. Finding food and water without becoming food in the process. Today, you'll try another adaptation, one that offered Homo habilis a critical advantage against the crocodile threat: time. Modern humans don't think much about timing our activities. We drink when thirsty, regardless of hour. We move about in darkness with artificial light. We've forgotten that time itself can be a survival tool. Homo habilis hadn't forgotten. Through bitter experience, they learned that predator activity followed patterns. Crocodiles, despite their terrifying adaptations, were still ectothermic reptiles. Their body temperature and activity levels were tied to environmental conditions. In the cool early morning, Crocodilus anthropophagus was sluggish, its metabolism slowed by the night's lower temperatures. It could still attack, still kill, but its reactions were fractionally slower, its sustainable pursuit distance shorter. This tiny window of reduced threat gave Homo habilis a critical opportunity. Your group moves quickly toward a water source, not the lake or river where yesterday's attacks occurred, but a different location. The strategy is simple but effective. Drink quickly during the coolest part of the day, then retreat to safer ground before the sun warms the crocodiles to their full predatory potential. It's working. The water's edge appears clear as your group approaches cautiously, the usual scanning, the usual rotation of drinking individuals while others stand guard. But today, there's no explosion of scales and teeth from the water, just the blessed relief of thirst, being quenched without bloodshed. This temporal adaptation, adjusting activity patterns to exploit predator weaknesses, was subtle but powerful. Those hominin groups that recognized and exploited these patterns had marginally better survival rates, their genes and behaviors becoming more common in subsequent generations. As the day warms, your group faces another challenge: finding food. Here, too, adaptation is evident. Instead of each individual foraging alone, the group spreads out in a loose formation, maintaining visual contact. When someone finds a patch of edible tubers or fruit, they make a distinctive call, bringing others to share the bounty. This cooperative foraging was more than just food sharing. It was a critical safety adaptation. Multiple eyes meant better predator detection. Multiple bodies meant more potential warning signals if danger approached. Even the simplest communication, a sharp alarm call when a predator was spotted, gave precious seconds for escape. For modern humans, with our complex language and technology, it's difficult to appreciate how revolutionary these simple cooperative behaviors were. But for a species under constant predation pressure, the ability to function as a coordinated group rather than isolated individuals was transformative. The fossil record tells this story too. Early hominin sites often show evidence of group activity, multiple individuals processing food in the same location, sharing resources, working cooperatively. This wasn't just cultural development, it was survival adaptation. But not all adaptations were successful. As your group moves across the savanna, you pass a grim reminder of this fact. The scattered bones of another Homo habilis band. Their skeletal remains tell a clear story. They tried to defend a fixed territory rather than moving nomadically. They built a simple shelter of piled stones and branches, a precursor to permanent settlements. It failed catastrophically. The predictability of their location made them easy targets. Predators, especially the territorially aware big cats, quickly learned where to find reliable prey. The abundance of bones suggests the entire group was killed in a single attack, likely by lions or hyenas. This represents a critical lesson in human evolution. Not all adaptations are improvements. Some are evolutionary dead ends, strategies that seem beneficial but ultimately reduce survival odds. For Homo habilis, attempts at territorial fixity were premature. The technology and social organization needed for successful permanent settlements were still hundreds of thousands of years in the future. Your group, wisely, remains nomadic, never staying in one location long enough for predators to predict your presence, never creating patterns that could be exploited by the increasingly intelligent hunting strategies of Crocodiles anthropophagus. By midday, the heat is oppressive. Your group seeks shade beneath a cluster of trees, conserving energy during the hottest hours when both predator and prey activity naturally decreases. This thermoregulatory adaptation, aligning rest periods with environmental conditions. So, just calories and water. But even in rest, adaptation continues. Two members of your group are modifying their stone tools, carefully striking one stone against another to create sharper edges. The distinctive sound of stone knapping carries across the savanna, a sound that would eventually become the percussion beat of human technological development. What's significant isn't just the tools themselves, but the social transmission of tool-making knowledge. The younger members watch intently as the more experienced toolmakers work, absorbing techniques through observation. This rudimentary teaching, learning by watching rather than through verbal instruction, allowed critical survival skills to pass between generations. Without this capacity for observational learning, each individual would need to reinvent technology from scratch. With it, knowledge accumulated, each generation building on the innovations of the last. This wasn't just cultural transmission, it was a survival adaptation that gave Homo habilis a critical edge over non-tool-using competitors. The afternoon brings new challenges as clouds gather on the horizon. The rainy season is approaching, a time of both opportunity and danger. Rain means more abundant plant foods, more drinking water sources, and potentially easier hunting as animals gather at water holes. But rain also means mud, which preserves footprints. Your group has learned through harsh experience to avoid leaving tracks that predators can follow. You stick to rocky ground when possible, cross streams to break your scent trail, avoid creating obvious paths to your sleeping locations. This track awareness represents another cognitive adaptation, understanding that evidence of your presence could be exploited by predators. Groups that minimized their trackable presence survived longer than those that left clear evidence of their movements and locations. The gathering clouds also trigger another adaptation, weather prediction. Even with a brain half the size of yours, Homo habilis could recognize basic weather patterns and adjust behavior accordingly. Your group moves toward a cluster of larger trees, seeking better shelter before the rain begins. This capacity for environmental prediction, recognizing patterns and acting on them before immediate necessity, was a cognitive leap that offered significant survival advantages. Those who could anticipate environmental changes rather than merely react to them had better survival odds in an ecosystem where margins for error were razor thin. But perhaps the most important adaptation visible in your group is the most subtle, emotional bonding. As you shelter from the coming rain, members of the group engage in mutual grooming, reinforcing social bonds through physical contact. A mother cradles her infant protectively. Two juveniles play a simple game with pebbles. These weren't just pleasant social interactions. They were the foundation of what would become humanity's greatest survival adaptation. Deep, complex social structures built on emotional connection. Groups whose members were emotionally bonded defended each other more vigorously, shared resources more willingly, cooperated more effectively. In the cold calculation of natural selection, individuals who cared about their group mates survived at higher rates than those who didn't. Empathy wasn't a luxury, it was a survival trait. The rain begins, a light drizzle that will soon become a downpour. Your group huddles closer together, sharing body heat, protecting the most vulnerable. This simple act of physical cooperation for thermoregulation saved countless early hominin lives, allowing groups to survive weather conditions that would kill isolated individuals. As darkness falls and the rain intensifies, your group faces another night of vulnerability. Despite all these adaptations, the tools, the social structures, the cognitive advancements, you remain desperately outmatched by the specialized predators that hunt you. This is the cruel reality of being Homo habilis. Even your most remarkable adaptations offered only marginal improvements in survival odds. You weren't evolving fast enough to outpace the predators co-evolving alongside you. Especially Crocodiles anthropophagus. For every adaptation Homo habilis developed to avoid crocodile predation, these prehistoric monsters developed counter-adaptations. Temporal avoidance led to broader activity periods. Track awareness led to more sophisticated ambush techniques. Group vigilance led to targeting isolated individuals. The fossil record tells this grim story. Despite all their adaptations, Homo habilis remained frequent prey. The tooth marks on their bones don't decrease over time. If anything, they become more common as predators refined their hominin hunting techniques. This is why you wouldn't survive a day as Homo habilis. Not because you lack their adaptations. You possess more advanced versions of every survival strategy they developed, but because the world they inhabited was so perfectly designed to kill them that even their most impressive adaptations barely tipped the odds in their favor. And the crocodiles, they weren't hunting fish, they were hunting you. The storm passes sometime in the night. Dawn reveals a transformed landscape. Pools of standing water, mud-slicked grass, bent vegetation. Your Homo habilis band emerges from the meager shelter, soaked and shivering, but alive. Another night survived against the odds. But survival isn't victory. It's just a temporary reprieve. The brutal truth is that Homo habilis lost their evolutionary battle. They disappeared around 1.65 million years ago, replaced by more advanced hominins like Homo erectus. Their adaptations weren't enough. Their tools weren't enough. Their brains weren't enough. And yet, in their extinction lies their greatest triumph. Because Homo habilis didn't just die out, they evolved. They became something better, something more capable of surviving in a world of specialized predators. Their legacy lives on in you, a modern human whose very existence is testament to the evolutionary pressure cooker of ancient Africa. This is the final, crucial piece of understanding why you wouldn't survive a day as Homo habilis. You don't need to. You are the end result of 2 million years of adaptation specifically designed to ensure survival against the threats they faced. As your band picks its way across the muddy landscape, heading toward higher ground, you pass something remarkable. Tracks in the soft earth. Not hominin tracks, not ordinary predator tracks, but the distinctive drag mark of a crocodile's tail and the impression of its splayed feet. Crocodilus anthropophagus, moving cross-country, far from water. These tracks tell a story that paleontologists wouldn't piece together until millions of years later. The specialized hominin hunting behavior of these prehistoric crocodiles wasn't just a feeding strategy. It was an evolutionary pressure that fundamentally shaped human development. Consider your brain. The human brain tripled in size over the course of our evolution, from the 600 cubic centimeters of Homo habilis to the 1,400 cubic centimeters of modern Homo sapiens. This expansion wasn't random. It wasn't inevitable. It happened because larger brains conferred specific survival advantages against specific threats. What threat requires a bigger brain rather than, say, bigger muscles or thicker skin? Predators that hunt through pattern recognition. Predators that learn and adapt their strategies. Predators like Crocodilus anthropophagus. Against most predators, physical adaptations are sufficient. Gazelles developed speed to outrun lions. Porcupines developed quills to deter jackals, but against a predator that could learn, remember, and adjust, a different kind of adaptation was required: intelligence. The hominins that survived crocodile predation weren't necessarily the strongest or fastest. They were the smartest, those with slightly better pattern recognition, slightly better problem-solving abilities, slightly more sophisticated communication and cooperation. Over hundreds of thousands of years, these marginal advantages accumulated, driving brain size increase far beyond what would have occurred without this specific predation pressure. Your group stops at a small water pool, one of many created by last night's rain. It's too small for an adult Crocodilus anthropophagus to hide in, offering a momentary reprieve from the constant crocodile threat. As each member drinks, you notice something subtle but significant: the way they approach the water, the constant scanning of the surroundings, the unconscious formation they create to maximize visibility in all directions. These behaviors aren't conscious decisions. They're instinctive, embedded in the deepest parts of your brain through millions of years of natural selection. Those without these instincts died before reproducing. Those with them passed their genes and their behaviors to their offspring. Modern humans still carry these adaptations. We still feel instinctive unease around murky water. We still experience instinctive fear responses to reptilian shapes and movements. Our brains still devote disproportionate processing power to detecting predatory patterns. These aren't cultural learning. They're hardwired survival adaptations shaped by the evolutionary pressure of creatures like Crocodiles anthropophagus. The academic term for this is evolutionary mismatch, adaptations that evolved for one environment continuing to influence behavior in a completely different environment. Your fear of public speaking, partially rooted in ancient social dynamics where rejection meant vulnerability to predators. Your anxiety in dark, enclosed spaces, an adaptive response to environments where such spaces often contained threats, your instinctive discomfort around reptiles, a direct legacy of ancestors who were hunted by them. As your band continues across the landscape, you encounter another hominin group, but not Homo habilis this time. These hominins are taller, their legs longer, their skulls slightly larger. Early Homo erectus, the species that would eventually replace Homo habilis throughout Africa. The encounter is tense, but not immediately hostile. There's recognition. These are similar enough to be recognized as kind, but different enough to register as competition. Resources are shared reluctantly, minimal communication established through gestures and vocalizations. What you're witnessing is the transition that would ultimately doom Homo habilis. Homo erectus wasn't just a slightly improved version of their predecessors. They represented a fundamental shift in hominin adaptation, the first of our ancestors to truly adapt to life in the open savanna, rather than the mixed woodland grassland environment preferred by earlier species. Their longer legs allowed for more efficient walking and running, increasing their range and escape speed. Their larger brains enabled more sophisticated tool use, better predator recognition, and more complex social cooperation. Their control of fire, a development that would come early in their evolution, gave them unprecedented protection against nocturnal predators. Most importantly for our story, Homo erectus was the first hominin to develop effective projectile weapons, the ability to hurt predators from a distance. This single adaptation fundamentally altered the predator-prey relationship, giving these early humans a fighting chance against even the most specialized predators, including Crocodiles anthropophagus. The fossil record tells this story through negative evidence. The gradual decrease in hominin remains bearing crocodile tooth marks. As Homo erectus spread throughout Africa, these specialized crocodiles lost their preferred prey. The evolutionary advantage that had made them such effective hominin hunters became a liability as their prey developed the means to fight back effectively. By 1.2 million years ago, Crocodiles anthropophagus was struggling. By 800,000 years ago, it was gone, replaced by less specialized crocodilian species better adapted to a world where hominins were no longer easy prey. In the brutally elegant logic of evolution, the very predation pressure that drove human brain development ultimately led to the extinction of the predator that created it. Crocodiles anthropophagus shaped human evolution only to be rendered extinct by the creature it helped create. Your Homo habilis band continues its daily struggle for survival, unaware of the evolutionary drama playing out across generations. For you, there is only today's challenge: finding food, finding water, avoiding predators, surviving until tomorrow. But in your struggles, in your adaptations, in your victories and failures, you are participating in something much larger. You are one link in the chain of selection and adaptation that will eventually lead to modern humans. Your experiences, which predator attacks you survive, which adaptations help you reproduce successfully, which behaviors you pass to your offspring, are shaping the future of humanity. This is perhaps the most profound legacy of the relationship between early hominins and their specialized predators, the recognition that predation pressure wasn't just something our ancestors endured, it was something that made us what we are. Consider language, perhaps humanity's most distinctive adaptation. Complex communication allowed for more effective predator warnings, better coordination during food gathering, more sophisticated social cooperation. Those with better communication abilities survived at higher rates, passing both their genetic predisposition and their learned behaviors to subsequent generations. Or consider our unique capacity for abstract thinking, the ability to recognize patterns across time and space, to predict outcomes based on limited information, to imagine scenarios we haven't directly experienced. These cognitive capabilities weren't luxury adaptations for philosophical contemplation. They were survival mechanisms against predators that employed pattern-based hunting strategies. Even our emotional lives bear the imprint of this ancient predator-prey relationship, the fight-or-flight response that floods your body with adrenaline during moments of perceived danger, the vigilance circuits that keep part of your brain alert even during sleep, the instinctive fear responses that activate before conscious thought. These aren't flaws in human psychology. They're adaptations shaped by millions of years of predation pressure. As night falls again, your band seeks shelter in a small cave, a rare luxury in this landscape. The fire hasn't been tamed yet. That innovation lies hundreds of thousands of years in the future with Homo erectus. But the cave offers better protection than the open savanna. A single entrance that can be watched, walls that prevent attack from behind. In the gathering darkness, one of the older males begins a simple rhythmic tapping with two stones, not tool-making, but something more fundamental, pattern creation. Others join in, adding their own rhythms, creating a complex soundscape that would eventually evolve into music, storytelling, cultural transmission. This behavior serves multiple functions. It reinforces social bonds. It occupies the mind during vulnerable hours. It may even help deter some predators, the unfamiliar sounds creating uncertainty that triggers caution in would-be attackers. But its most important function is one the participants can't possibly comprehend. It's laying the groundwork for symbolic thinking, for the capacity to create and manipulate abstract representations of reality. This cognitive leap, more than any other, would eventually give humans the edge over their predators. Morning comes, another day of survival in a world designed to kill you. Your band emerges from the cave, immediately alert for danger, scanning the surrounding landscape for threats. In the distance, at a waterhole, you see something that freezes your blood, the massive form of Crocodilus anthropophagus, partially submerged, waiting with reptilian patience for prey to approach. But it's not alone. Another crocodile of similar size lurks nearby, and a third is visible on the opposite bank. What you're witnessing is another adaptation in the evolutionary arms race, cooperative hunting. Just as hominins developed group strategies for protection, their predators developed group strategies for predation. This wasn't coincidence, it was co-evolution, each species forcing adaptational changes in the other through selective pressure. Your band wisely avoids this waterhole, seeking hydration elsewhere, but the image of multiple crocodiles coordinating their hunting efforts would have profound implications for hominin evolution. It meant that even group protection strategies weren't enough. It meant that more sophisticated cooperation, more complex communication, more effective weapons were necessary for survival. This is why you, a modern human, wouldn't survive a day as Homo habilis. Not because you lack their adaptations, you possess more advanced versions of every survival strategy they developed, but because you've lost the constant vigilance, the perpetual awareness of vulnerability, the acceptance of your place in the food chain rather than atop it. Your modern brain has been shaped by 2 million years of evolution under predation pressure, but your modern experiences haven't reinforced those adaptations. You've never needed to scan every water source for lurking predators. You've never needed to coordinate group defense against nocturnal hunters. You've never needed to recognize the subtle signs of an ambush predator concealed in grass. These skills, once critical for daily survival, have atrophied in modern humans. We retain the neural architecture for them, the instinctive fear responses, the heightened attention to certain environmental cues, but without constant reinforcement, they're shadows of what our ancestors possessed. The legacy of Crocodilus anthropophagus and other specialized hominin predators lives on in us nonetheless. It lives in our large brains, our complex social structures, our capacity for cooperation and abstract thinking. It lives in our instinctive fears and our unconscious behaviors around water. It lives in the evolutionary mismatch between our ancient adaptations and our modern environment. Next time you feel an instinctive shiver at the sight of a crocodile at the zoo, or experience inexplicable anxiety around murky water, or startle at an unexpected movement in your peripheral vision, remember, these aren't irrational fears. They're evolutionary echoes, the whispered warnings of ancestors who survived because they feared exactly those things. As for Homo habilis, their story ended but didn't conclude. They evolved or were replaced, their adaptations either incorporated into subsequent species or rendered obsolete by better solutions. Their fossil remains, bearing the tooth marks of Crocodilus anthropophagus, stand as testament to the brutal crucible that forged humanity. And the crocodiles, their specialized hominin hunting adaptations became an evolutionary dead end as their prey developed the means to fight back effectively. Modern crocodilians are their descendants, but they've lost the specific adaptations that made Crocodilus anthropophagus such an effective hominin hunter. But they still remember. In their primitive reptilian brains, modern crocodiles still recognize human silhouettes, still respond to human movement patterns, still employ hunting strategies refined over millions of years of co-evolution with our ancestors. They weren't hunting fish, they were hunting you. And in the deepest, oldest parts of your brain, you remember being hunted.